As the black pieces, Nodirbek, the white, the Uzbek GM, opens with 1 e4. What is Pragg going to respond with? He plays pawn to e5. Very solid, but I'm sure that the game is going to get very exciting because both of these players are uncompromising. They like to fight till the very end and they never really like to make short draws. So knight comes out to c6. The question is, will Nodirbek go for the Italian? No, he goes for the Spanish today with bishop to b5. And Pragg now is going to play a6, the main move, not going for the Berlin. a6, bishop a4 is the very likely move here to be made. Yes, he plays his bishop back. And now the main line is knight to f6, but Pragg goes knight e7. Slightly surprising, and in fact, Pragg has played this for the first time today. So Nodirbek pauses a bit and then quickly castles because generally in the opening, Nodirbek is so well prepared. Now Pragg goes knight g6. He's now overprotecting the pawn on e5, but actually the knight on g6 is slightly weirdly placed. You know, it's not normal to have it over there in the opening. c3 by Nodirbek. He wants to play d4. Pragg instantly strikes in the center with d5. Pawn takes pawn, and now the queen is likely to take here. You can notice that with the knight on g6 defending e5 and the pawn on c3 that stops knight c3 to attack the queen, Pragg is quite happy to bring his queen in the center of the board. Now the bishop comes to the beautiful diagonal attacking the queen. The queen has to move from d5. Where will it go? It goes to d3. Just moving in to the center of the board, telling Nodirbek you can't push your pawn, but Nodirbek asks the queen to move away. Bishop c2 played, and now the queen has to move back. So Pragg plays queen to d6. So he's brought his queen back here, and it is quite well placed. And this is all opening theory for Pragg, and you can see Nodirbek is slightly bleeding on time because this is a new position for him. He plays the very logical move rook e1, preparing d4. Bishop e7 looks like the main move, but Pragg goes for a new move now, bishop e6. This hasn't been played before, and d4 played here. Wow. Now Pragg can take this pawn. It's one of the main moves here, but actually he prefers bishop e7 because if you took, there were some insane complications with take and knight f7, which are fine for black, but Pragg wasn't able to find a way through them. So Nodirbek now plays bishop e3, and Pragg now takes the pawn. He takes d4, and knight takes on d4 here. I think taking the knight makes a lot of sense. You don't want to be giving up your bishop, so Pragg takes it. And what has actually transpired here is a very symmetrical pawn structure with 3 pawns each on each side of the board. Black now castles it out here. So black is pretty fine. And now knight d2 played here by Nodirbek. Maybe he wants to go knight e4, maybe knight f3. Pawn comes up to c5, hitting the bishop here in the center, and Nodirbek goes back to e3. So even though the pawn structure is symmetrical, there are quite a few imbalances here in the position. Queen comes out to h5. Now looking in this direction, also looking here, Pragg goes rook d8, centralizing his rook, and g3. Maybe not the best move here by Nodirbek because it weakens these light squares, and queen c8 threatening bishop g4 would be a great idea. But Pragg goes rook d5, attacking the queen from here, and now the queen needs to move back on e2. And that's very likely. Yes, he goes back to e2. So bishop b3 maybe is one of the ideas. Knight c4 can happen. b5 played by Pragg. In a way gaining space but also creating a target to be hit later on. f4 played by Nodirbek. Now one of the plans is to go f5, so Pragg stops it with queen c8. If you think about this position, white has more space. The knight on g6 looks silly, but at the same time the king is slightly open. Who's this going to benefit? And Nodirbek plays a4, hitting the queen side of Pragg. These two bishops angling here. This is making slightly difficult Prague's task of how to continue. He goes queen f2, and now have to be careful about f5 trapping this bishop. So the bishop comes back, offering a trade, and Nodirbek does not, first takes on b5. If you take, he will take back with the knight. So pawn takes pawn has happened, and now Nodirbek simply says to Prague, I don't want to trade. Look at my two bishops here. You are in some real trouble. Prague says, I'm going to persist the trade. I'm going to go after you. Well, Nodirbek says, sorry, now you can't trade anymore. Well, how does Prague continue here now is the question. His knight is very, very bad. He needs to find a space for his knight. Knight h8 is not somewhere you want to go. But b4, this is a nice move. Trying to sort of simplify the queen side. Pawn comes up to c4. And now Prague goes bishop f6, hitting the b2 pawn. But now knight e4 is a classy move. And I think Nodirbek will play it because it defends the pawn on b2. No, he's tempted by rook a8 to hit the queen. But now the queen can simply move away. And that's exactly what Prague is planning to do. He's thinking a bit and he plays queen d7. Nice move there. Now the point is that the rooks are going to get traded, and perhaps it's only helped black. So knight e4 should have been tried there, but rook d8 taken. Once again the b2 pawn is hanging, so Nodirbek comes in with his knight. And now if you move the bishop, c5 is hanging 3 times. But Prague has something prepared. He comes in queen d3 and he's okay if Nodirbek spoils his structure because the c4 pawn is hanging. Nodirbek is not tempted by that. He takes the pawn on c5, and now Prague must take the pawn back on c4. So equal material, and the game is quite intense, but it's still equal. Knight comes in, hitting the queen, looking at this. Maybe someday the bishop can jump to d5. Prague moves into b3, pressurizing the b2 pawn. What a game this is. Move for move, both of them are playing the best moves here. Bishop f3 played, and now Prague goes h6, just making sure that his back rank is safe. Nodirbek plays bishop h5, just putting pressure here. Maybe the pawn can be taken on b2 here, because if rook b1, there is queen c3 hitting here, threatening queen c1 later. Queen d5, oh, they are repeating. Maybe the game ends in a draw now. But clearly both of them are fighters. Prague repeats for another time. Will Nodirbek go bishop h5? Is Prague just provoking him? Seems like it. Rook e2, a mistake has been made by Nodirbek. Because rook d6, bishop d6, check, and you lose the bishop there. 2 pieces for a rook. Look at Prague. He's calmed down. He's taken on d6. But Nodirbek has an intermezzo. He gives a check and he says to Prague, now my d1 square is controlled by the bishop. So you won't be able to play queen d1 check. Praggnanandhaa now moves his king to h7. What does he have in mind? Because after bishop d6, hasn't he just given up an entire exchange? Bishop d6, there's no queen d1. Well, Prague now finds a simply brilliant move. Bishop d4. Look at Nodirbek's face there. He's surprised. Queen takes d4 happens. Queen f3. On g2 there is a mate. On f1 there is a mate. And this is actually trouble time. Queen has to come back to f2, and through another route, Praggnanandhaa finds this combination with a check and the bishop falls. What a brilliant combination there. Nodirbek made one inaccuracy and Prague latched onto it, and now he has 2 pieces for a rook, and this king on g1 is very, very weak. Of course, there's some technical work to be done here, but clearly it's not so difficult. Prague goes back with the bishop here. Look at how he first stabilizes his position. There's no hurry. The bishop controls the pawn, and now knight comes in, maybe to come to f5. And later on, you can even push the pawn to b3. So queen moves up, offering a trade. Nodirbek understands that his best chances lie if the queens are traded and if he goes into the endgame. But of course, Praggnanandhaa doesn't really intend to trade queens. Well, he does it. He does it. Prague is like, I can even win this in the end game. Rook takes e3, and now pawn push to b3 is maybe the best move. Yes, this actually now the pawn is perennially guarded, and pawn on b2 is a weakness. So the king comes up to f2, and now knight f5. No, he plays g6. So he wants to push his pawn to h5. pawn to g4. You can't take the pawn because knight on e7 is hanging, and king g7 played. So here pawn to h3 has been played, and black now goes king to f6. Rook e4 played by Nodirbek Abdusattorov. And how is Praggnanandhaa going to make progress is the question. Well, Pragg gives us the answer. He plays h5 and he tells, if you play g5 you will be giving up the f5 square to me. So Nodirbek plays his king to g3, and now knight to d5. This is nicely placed. King h4 comes in, and now how is Pragg going to continue? He takes on g4, pawn takes on g4, and Pragg just goes back. Now the threats, look at this, bishop g4, king g4, knight f6 check, and you are in a winning pawn endgame. So Nodirbek was forced to push his pawn to g5, but step by step Pragg is making progress by Pragg. Now bishop c2, b2 is hanging, rook c4. Look at this. You put your bishop here, then the rook can never defend this pawn, and then you slowly bring your knight over. The best is just put your knight from e3 to d1, and just this pawn falls. So Pragg is doing it in style now. Nodirbek does not have any real ideas or moves. Pragg moves in with knight e3, knight d1 is coming in. Nodirbek really played well out of the opening. He fought, but one mistake and somehow slightly over ambition there when they were repeating has led him to this position where he is completely lost. There was no chance of recovery. He offers his hand in resignation.